I spent 7 years chasing her and gave her everything I had, only for her to heartlessly terminate our pregnancy, cut me off, sell our shared assets, and move overseas to find someone new. Now that she has been dumped, she has crawled back to cause scenes at my house, harass my fiancé, and beg for a second chance in public. While others have the nerve to call me cold, I simply look back and realize I was just incredibly blind to who she really was. At our college reunion, my ex-wife, Ava, stared at the engagement ring on my finger for what felt like an eternity before asking if my fiancé was more beautiful than her. Our old friends started cheering and egging me on, demanding an immediate answer. I slowly rotated the band on my finger and calmly told her that my fiancé was, in fact, quite a bit more stunning than she was. By the time the party was winding down, Ava's expression had turned sour. She cornered me as people were leaving, glaring at me with intensity as she asked what she was supposed to be to me after I had spent 7 years devoted to her. She demanded to know what I had actually felt for her all those years if I could just move on to an engagement so easily. I gave a short laugh and told her to just consider me legally blind during that period of my life. The drinks were flowing freely at the reunion, and everyone was busy making toasts. I was just getting started when Ava suddenly reached out to cover my glass, looking at me with feigned concern while reminding me that my stomach couldn't handle too much alcohol. A heavy silence fell over the table as everyone realized she had seemingly forgotten that we had ended things a long time ago. My history with Ava was a complicated, toxic mess that started the moment I saw her. I was a freshman at NYU when I first laid eyes on her, and I fell hard instantly. From that day forward, I made it my life's mission to win her over. I would bring her breakfast every morning and make her tea whenever she wasn't feeling well. For her birthdays, I made sure the most expensive bouquets were delivered straight to her dorm room. I was at her beck and call, dropping everything the moment she asked for even the smallest favor. It was common knowledge across the entire campus that Ava had a loyal, obedient shadow following her around. As the years went by, she grew accustomed to my constant presence and my unwavering attention. By our junior year, I was making my 865th attempt at asking her to be my girlfriend. I stood there with a bouquet in my hands and asked her to finally be mine. She kept that same unreadable expression on her face, making it impossible for me to tell what was going through her head. She called me a fool as she took the flowers, but she didn't actually give me a yes or a no. Despite her playing hard to get, the ambiguity of our relationship led everyone to assume we were a couple. Right before graduation, tragedy struck Ava's family in Chicago. Her father had been working back-to-night shifts and fell asleep at the wheel, causing a fatal accident that killed another person. The legal settlements were going to cost $300,000, and her mother was already chronically ill and bedridden. Their family had lost its provider and was suddenly drowning in massive debt. I had recently started my own tech firm, which had luckily just gone public, so I actually had some significant capital on hand. I loaded the necessary funds onto a bank card and drove over to Ava's house. The front door had been vandalized with red spray, paint that read, "Eye for an eye," in jagged letters. Neighbors and strangers alike would stop to spit on their driveway as they walked past. I tried to knock, but the door was already unlatched and slightly open. When I stepped inside, I found Ava sitting alone at the kitchen table, staring into space with hollow eyes. I walked straight to her, pressed the bank card into her palm, and pulled her into a fierce embrace. I told her not to be afraid because I was going to take care of everything. She looked up at me, and for the first time, the numbness in her eyes broke into a wave of emotion. Her eyes filled with tears as she realized she wasn't alone in this nightmare. She asked me why I was doing so much for her, and I told her simply that it was because I loved her. Ava was speechless for a long moment before she finally looked at me and suggested that we should officially be together. After graduation, Ava and I moved into an apartment in Manhattan together. I stayed focused on growing my company, and with my financial backing, Ava launched her own startup that was quickly gaining traction. It felt like both of our professional lives were heading toward incredible success. One night, as we were lying in bed after turning off the lights, Ava suddenly asked if I liked kids. I was caught off guard by the question and asked her what her own thoughts were on the matter. She told me she found them noisy and didn't really like them, so I started to say that we didn't have to have any. However, she cut me off mid-sentence to say that she wanted a child that was uniquely ours. We tried to conceive for a long time without any success, which led Ava to seek medical advice. She was eventually diagnosed with PCOS and told she might struggle with infertility. She fell into a deep depression during that time, looking as though all the life had been drained out of her. I decided to propose to her in hopes of pulling her out of that dark place. She said yes immediately, her face lighting up with a joy that brought her to the verge of tears. We spent that night holding each other while she sobbed quietly, thanking me for wanting to marry someone she felt was broken. We went out for a special anniversary dinner at a nice restaurant in the city. In the middle of our meal, Ava was suddenly hit by a wave of nausea and began to get sick right there at the table. I rushed her to the emergency room, where the doctors informed us that she was already 2 months pregnant. Ava broke down in tears of joy and threw her arms around me, crying out that we were finally going to have our own baby. I held her close, my heart feeling like it was about to burst with happiness. Yet I found myself unable to find the right words to express how I felt. Ava decided to take a leave of absence from her startup to focus on a healthy pregnancy. The problem was that she didn't have anyone qualified to step in and manage things while she was away. Just as she was starting to stress over the situation, Ethan entered the picture. He was a guy who had been a year behind Ava in college and had recently graduated with a reputation for being incredibly sharp. Ava decided to hire Ethan as her interim CEO, which meant he was constantly commuting between her office and our house. He had to give her daily briefings and discuss major decisions in person before relaying her orders back to the executive team. Every evening when I got home, Ava would sit me down to talk, and Ethan's name seemed to come up in every single conversation. She kept telling me how impressed she was with his work ethic and how reliable he had become. She called him a rare talent, and even suggested that I should try to recruit him for my own firm once she was back from maternity leave. I laughed and playfully tapped her forehead, asking her why she would want to give away such a valuable asset to me. She told me that she was serious because Ethan was so capable that he would take a huge weight off my shoulders. She said she just wanted me to be less stressed so she could stop worrying about me. There was a time when Ava and I were so inseparable that we wanted to spend every waking second together. However, things started to feel different after a while, though I couldn't quite put my finger on when the shift began. Our conversations used to be about our future together, but they slowly devolved into a daily highlight reel of Ethan's accomplishments. She would go on about how brilliant he was or how thoughtful he could be, even mentioning that he remembered her cycle better than anyone. She told me about the time Ethan made her lunch after a meeting and how surprisingly good his cooking was. Then there was the day he brought her a single flower, telling her it reminded him of her. She mentioned that Ethan wanted to take her out over the weekend as a thank you for her mentorship. She even casually brought up that while I was away on a business trip, Ethan had stayed so late working on a project that she just let him crash on her couch. She laughed about how he talked in his sleep and how different he was from his professional persona. She then told me she wanted to buy him an expensive birthday gift to show her appreciation for all his hard work at the office. Ethan's name had become a permanent fixture in our home, and I finally reached my breaking point. I snapped at Ava and asked her if she could go 5 minutes without mentioning him. She looked startled and apologized, saying she realized I was probably exhausted from work and didn't want to hear about office drama. She completely missed the point, failing to realize that the issue wasn't the amount of talking, but the subject of it. I told her flat out that I wanted her to fire Ethan and find a new interim CEO. I made it very clear that I didn't like the guy. Ava's brow furrowed in confusion as she asked me why I would want to get rid of someone so talented. She demanded to know what possible grievance I could have against him. She reminded me that it was her company and her employee, questioning why I thought I had any right to interfere. I felt a bitter sting in my chest as I realized how far apart we had grown. I asked her why Ethan was allowed to interfere in our personal lives if I wasn't allowed to have an opinion on her business. It was clear that she was intentionally pushing me away while letting Ethan take up more and more space in her life. When I went silent, Ava placed a hand on her stomach and gave me a sad, twisted smile. She asked if I was just losing interest in her because her pregnancy meant we couldn't be as intimate as we used to be. I was baffled by how she could even think that was the case. Everything I was doing, from taking on extra projects to working late nights, was for her and the future of our unborn child. A surge of resentment and anger boiled over inside me. I told her she needed to wake up and realize that I was her husband and the father of her child, while Ethan was nothing more than a stranger. I lost my temper and yelled at her, which clearly shook her up. She stood there in shock for a moment before turning around and retreating to the bedroom without a word. The door slammed shut with a heavy thud, followed immediately by the sharp click of the lock turning. I stood alone in the living room, staring at two unused movie tickets sitting on the coffee table. I felt something inside me shatter in that moment. That sound of the lock was the official start of a long, freezing silence between us. We didn't speak for nearly an entire week. She went out of her way to avoid me, even making sure we didn't eat at the same time. For the first few days, I was stubborn and gave her the same cold shoulder. Eventually, my resolve weakened and I tried to break the ice. She wouldn't even look at me, simply stating that I was the one who found her so annoying in the first place. She was still acting distant the day before I had to leave for a business trip to Chicago. As I was putting on my shoes at the door, I told her I was heading out and to call me if she needed anything. She instinctively told me to be safe on the road before she could catch herself. As soon as the words left her mouth, she looked away and grabbed the TV remote, pretending she had just been talking to the empty room. I just nodded and told her I had stocked the fridge with fruit and honey for her. I instructed her not to worry about any chores while I was gone because I had arranged for a maid to come by and check on her. Despite the tension between us, I found myself looking forward to going home while I was away. Even in the middle of meetings, I would wonder what she was doing at that exact moment. I imagined her curled up in bed with a book, absent-mindedly stroking her baby bump. I pictured her in the kitchen experimenting with dessert recipes and complaining about them being too sugary. I could see her lounging on the sofa and whispering to the baby about all the adventures we would go on as a family. I had played out 1,000 happy scenarios in my head. The one thing I didn't expect was to walk through the front door and find her laughing and joking with Ethan. I had no idea what he had said to her, but she looked genuinely happy, almost radiant. She gave his shoulder a playful swat and told him to stop being ridiculous, her eyes sparkling with amusement. Ethan just watched her with a quiet intensity before reaching out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. My face went cold as I stood there watching them. When Ava realized I was home, her smile vanished instantly, replaced by the same icy stare she had given me before I left. She greeted me with a flat, emotionless voice. She then informed me that she was going out to dinner with Ethan and told me to just find something for myself in the kitchen. She casually added that she could bring me leftovers if I didn't feel like cooking. I told her that wouldn't be necessary, struggling to keep my voice steady as I spoke. Ethan gave me a brief nod before following her out of the house. The silence in the house was deafening once they were gone. I felt a crushing weight on my chest, making it hard to even draw a breath. I couldn't stop wondering where I had gone wrong. I tried to pinpoint the moment everything started falling apart. We used to be so happy and so in love, and I couldn't understand how those feelings could just vanish into thin air. A wave of exhaustion washed over me, and I started to think that maybe it was time to give up. I sighed and made some ramen, deciding that we needed to have a serious conversation when she got back. I had a glass of honey water waiting for her when she finally returned. I told her we needed to talk, but she just brushed me off, saying she was too tired to deal with anything until the morning. I insisted that we needed to clear the air immediately and promised it wouldn't take long. She slammed her glass down on the table and snapped at me, asking why I couldn't be more considerate of how tired she was after being on her feet all day. I tried to start the conversation again, but she cut me off, raising her voice and accusing me of being completely unreasonable. She told me she didn't know what my problem was lately, questioning if I was just stressed or if I had stopped loving her altogether. She complained that I was always angry or giving her the silent treatment. She asked me what was so urgent that it couldn't wait, mockingly suggesting that maybe I wanted to discuss a divorce or start fighting over custody of the baby. She asked if I was blind to the fact that our lives were already falling apart. I looked at her, stunned, and asked her what our marriage even meant to her at this point. She dodged the question and simply stated that we both needed some space to clear our heads. The tension in the house only grew thicker over the following days. We were eating dinner one night when she casually mentioned that Ethan had confessed his feelings for her. I froze, my grip on my fork loosening until it clattered against my plate. I was stunned and asked her how she had responded to him. She just shook her head, looking frustrated, and said she didn't know what to do. She told me her head was spinning and that she was worried a direct rejection would hurt his feelings. She started to say something about not being able to leave us, but her voice trailed off into nothing. Seeing her sit there looking so conflicted over another man was the final straw for me. I finally snapped and asked her if she even wanted to be part of this family anymore. I slammed my silverware down so hard the table shook. Ava jumped, then stood up and slammed her own hands down, demanding to know why I was yelling at her for no reason. I pointed out that she had been obsessed with Ethan for weeks, and now that he had made a move, she was more concerned about his feelings than mine. I asked her what that made me, and if she had completely lost her mind. She admitted he confessed, but argued that it didn't change the fact that he was just an employee. She accused me of overreacting to her occasionally mentioning a colleague. I reminded her about the private dinners, the movies, and the way they flirted on our sofa. I told her she had let him cross the line repeatedly and asked how she could possibly still claim it was just business. I asked her if she honestly believed their behavior looked professional. She gritted her teeth and screamed my name, telling me that if I didn't trust her, she couldn't trust me either. We were standing there, ready to tear each other apart, when we heard the front door unlock. Ethan walked in and looked back and forth between us, sensing the tension in the room. He asked what was going on, and I just laughed bitterly while pointing at him. I told him I was impressed that he had managed to get his hands on a spare key to our home. Ava ran her fingers through her hair in frustration and told me she didn't recognize me anymore. She reminded me of how I used to buy breakfast and run errands for the guy she was dating in college without ever complaining. She couldn't believe I was making such a big deal out of a simple key, claiming it didn't mean anything. She asked if I was just looking for a reason to start a fight because it made me feel better. I told her to look deep inside and ask herself if she really believed this was just about a piece of metal. She went quiet, unable to find a comeback. Ethan finally spoke up, telling me not to blame Ava because he was the one who had been pursuing her. He apologized and took all the responsibility, claiming she was innocent in all of this. Ethan apologized over and over again before giving me a deep bow and bolting out the door. Ava immediately started after him, reaching the doorway in seconds. I shouted after her, warning her that if she walked out that door, there would be no coming back for us. She begged me not to force her to make a choice. I told her very clearly that she had to choose between me and our baby or Ethan. Her eyes filled with tears that began to stream down her face. She looked exactly like she did back in college when her life was falling apart. She instinctively put a hand over her stomach, looked me in the eye, and whispered an apology. She walked out anyway, leaving me alone in our silent apartment. I felt completely abandoned as I paced around the empty rooms. I spent a week in a complete fog before deciding to sell the place. Ethan went with Ava to the courthouse, and we finalized the divorce without any drama. I never reached out to her again after that day. I only knew from mutual friends that she had taken Ethan's advice to sell her company and move to London with him. As for our child, Ethan convinced her that they shouldn't keep it. Our baby was taken from this world on an operating table, ending the only real connection we had left. Ava seemed to realize she had crossed the line and went quiet. Our old class president tried to lighten the mood by telling everyone to just relax and enjoy the night. He raised his glass and declared that no one was allowed to stay sober at a reunion. Sean chimed in, complimenting Ava by saying she was still as beautiful and kind-hearted as she was in college. Ava smiled at everyone and joked that they were going to give her an ego if they kept it up. One of the guys insisted they were just being honest reminding her that she was the most beautiful girl in our entire year. Cameron, who had clearly had too much to drink, blurted out that I used to be completely wrapped around her finger and had once sworn she was the only woman I'd ever marry. The room went dead silent again after that comment. The class president nudged Cameron and told him to knock it off. I downed my drink and told everyone that it was ancient history. Ava waited a beat before giving a forced, sad smile and agreeing that it was all behind us. Trying to change the subject, she pointed out the simple band on my finger and told me it was a nice ring, though she claimed I was wearing it on the wrong hand. The class president tried to clear his throat to stop her, but she ignored him. She pointed to her own right hand and told me that wearing a ring on the left had a specific meaning, teasing me for being as careless as I used to be. I looked down at the band and felt a small smile tug at my lips. I told her I hadn't made a mistake and calmly informed the table that I was engaged. Ava looked like she had been slapped, her eyes filling with a mix of shock and confusion. The class president laughed and told me I was being a terrible friend for keeping such big news a secret. He joked that even if Ava had been away, the rest of them were still around and deserved to know I was getting married. He couldn't believe I hadn't let a single detail slip until now. I reminded them that when she and Ethan went public, she had told everyone that keeping in touch with me was a liability. She had blocked me on everything the second she decided I was a threat to her new life. I shrugged and said I wouldn't have known how to reach her even if I wanted to. I explained that between the family planning for the engagement party and a massive project at work, I just hadn't had the time to make a big announcement. I told them it had just slipped my mind and offered to take a shot as an apology. I poured myself a drink and downed it in one go while smiling at the group. Ava finally seemed to snap out of her trance and tried to force a smile, though it looked more like a grimace. She told me it was all very sudden and mentioned that she hadn't even met the woman yet. Before I could respond, a drunk Cameron joked that she wouldn't be a fiancée for long and that Ava would soon have to show her some respect. Ava ignored him and repeated that she was curious to see who I was marrying. Ava gripped her glass so hard her knuckles turned white before draining it. She started firing off questions about what kind of person my fiancé was, asking about her personality, her height, and where she was from. She paused for a second before asking with a smirk if the girl was as pretty as she was. The class president took her playful tone as a sign that she was over me, so he stopped trying to steer the conversation away from my personal life. He told the group that Sophia was actually quite a catch. Others chimed in, describing her as tall, elegant, and incredibly kind. Someone mentioned that she was a successful designer who was actually making a name for herself in the industry. Ava just nodded slowly while the others insisted I bring her to the next gathering. She tried to laugh it off, but she looked incredibly uncomfortable as she questioned if Sophia was really as beautiful as everyone was claiming. I looked her right in the eye while playing with my ring and told her that Sophia was definitely more beautiful. Ava just looked away and muttered something about me being lucky. I casually asked her how things were going with Ethan and if they had any wedding plans of their own. The class president agreed, telling her it was time she settled down and found some stability. Ava started tracing the rim of her glass, looking distracted as she said she was still thinking about it. The night dragged on as more drinks were ordered, and eventually, people started heading home. I headed down to the parking lot to call an Uber. I was just about to get to my car when Ava stepped out from the shadows to block my path, asking me how my life had been since she left. I told her I was doing great and that while I occasionally thought about the past, I had moved on. She looked at me with hurt in her eyes and asked if I was really going to be this cold to her. I couldn't figure out what her angle was. She was with Ethan and I was engaged, so standing in a dark parking lot together was already crossing a line. I didn't see how being professional was the same as being cold. She asked if I was really prepared to spend the rest of my life with another woman. When I didn't answer, she grabbed my arm, her eyes red and filled with a desperate, frantic intensity. She reminded me that I had spent 7 years of my life chasing her and demanded to know how I could just replace her so easily. She wanted to know what she had even meant to me. I pulled my arm away and gave her a small, cold smile, telling her to just consider me legally blind during our time together. She visibly flinched, her lips trembling as she struggled to find something to say. I didn't give her another glance as my ride pulled up. I got in the car and left her standing there. The next evening, I walked into my apartment only to find Ava sitting right there in my living room. Sophia greeted me at the door and took my coat, explaining that she had run into Ava on the street. She said Ava had introduced herself as an old friend, so she had invited her up for a drink. I looked over at Ava, who was watching me with a smug, unreadable smirk. Sophia put on her apron and headed toward the kitchen, telling us to catch up while she started on dinner. As soon as Sophia was out of earshot, I dragged Ava toward the door and demanded to know what she was playing at. Ava just laughed and asked if she was supposed to be a secret now. I started to snap at her, but she cut me off. She told me I hadn't changed a bit, still yelling whenever I felt cornered. She sat back down on the sofa and asked if Sophia was aware of the fact that I was a divorced man. I clenched my fists as I reminded her that she was the one who chose to end our pregnancy and throw away her career for Ethan. I asked her if things were so bad with him that she felt the need to come back and ruin my happiness. I asked her what I had ever done to deserve her obsession. She didn't say a word, instead looking past me toward the kitchen just as Sophia walked out with a tray. Sophia mentioned she had found some leftover cake in the fridge and wanted to share it. Sophia set a plate down in front of Ava and another in front of me, telling Ava she had to try it because it was from her favorite bakery. Ava thanked her with a sweet smile, while Sophia teased me about not eating mine yet. She reminded me that my stomach was sensitive and told me to let the cake warm up a bit before I had any. The two of them talked throughout dinner until I finally decided it was time for Ava to leave. I told her it was getting late and that she should probably get home so her boyfriend wouldn't worry. I made it very clear that the visit was over, but Ava didn't budge. She took Sophia's hand and casually mentioned that she was single now, so she had no reason to rush home. She told Sophia how much she enjoyed her company and wanted to stay longer. She then turned the conversation towards Sophia's personal life, asking if she was looking for a partner or if she had lost faith in the idea of marriage. Ava shook her head and explained that she had recently ended a relationship. She then dropped the bombshell that she had been married once before but was now divorced. She looked directly at me with a defiant glint in her eyes as she spoke. Sophia just nodded sympathetically and suggested that she probably just hadn't found the right man yet. Sophia tried to comfort her by saying she would find someone eventually. Ava agreed, telling Sophia how lucky she was to have found someone as great as me. Sophia smiled and said that I treated her wonderfully and that she loved me deeply. Ava remarked on how in love we seemed, and Sophia admitted that while we had our small arguments, that was just part of a normal relationship. Sophia explained that a little patience and understanding could solve almost anything. She believed that as long as there was love, any obstacle could be overcome. Ava mentioned that in her marriage, a single fight had led to her husband abandoning her. Sophia was shocked, saying she couldn't imagine anyone being that heartless. Ava continued, saying that her ex was now getting married again while she was left alone, unable to sleep because she missed him so much. I couldn't take the manipulation anymore and stood up to cut her off. Sophia looked at me, confused by my sudden outburst. I told her that Ava really needed to get going and added that it wasn't safe for her to be out alone so late. Sophia agreed and asked me to walk Ava to the street. Once we were outside, Ava looked at me with absolute confidence and told me that she was a much better match for me than Sophia. I told her to get lost, but she just stepped closer and warned me that I would regret rejecting her. I asked her who she thought she was to think she was such a prize. I told her to stop being so delusional and pushed her back. I accused her of trying to ruin my life just because hers was a mess, coming back to sabotage my relationship now that Ethan had dumped her. She looked hurt and grabbed my shirt, begging me to believe that she only came back because she still loved me. She told me she missed me and asked for a hug, pleading for us to start over. She promised she would be 1,000 times better as a wife than Sophia could ever be. She begged me not to leave her, saying I was all she had left in the world. Her voice started to sound muffled and distant as a wave of pure exhaustion hit me. Even talking to her was draining, and I felt like I couldn't even breathe the same air as her. I yanked my shirt out of her grip and asked her if she had any self-respect left. She stood there looking hollow for a moment before she suddenly snapped and started screaming at me. She admitted she was shameless, but demanded to know what that made me. She asked me if I thought I was better than her, pointing out that I was about to marry Sophia without telling her about my past. She told me we were exactly the same and that I had no right to judge her. She started laughing hysterically, saying we were a perfect match. I didn't have a comeback because she was right about one thing I hadn't told Sophia about our marriage. I had always felt that my past with Ava wasn't worth mentioning or even thinking about. I had locked those memories away because they represented the most painful chapter of my life. I had tried so hard to go numb and forget everything about her. However, I realized that I couldn't keep hiding the truth from Sophia any longer and needed to be honest with her. I ignored Ava and walked her to the gate before heading back upstairs. Later that night, I lay in bed watching Sophia sleep peacefully beside me. The room was silent except for the sound of our breathing. I whispered her name to see if she was awake, and she softly replied that she was. I told her there was something important I needed to say. She turned toward me and rested her head on my chest, asking what was on my mind. I took a deep breath and told her that I had been married before and that I had almost been a father. She asked what happened to the baby, and I told her that the pregnancy had been terminated. She whispered that it was a heartbreaking thing to go through. We lay there in silence for a few minutes before I finally told her that Ava was my ex-wife. Sophia didn't say anything at first, just letting the information sink in. After a moment, she pulled me closer and told me to let the past stay in the past. She said that we needed to look forward and that my history didn't change how she felt about me. She told me she was happy with the man I was today, and that was all that mattered. I held her tight, feeling like no words could ever express my gratitude. As we lay there, Sophia gently traced the line of my jaw with her finger. She told me she had her own news to share and then whispered that she was pregnant. It felt like the world stopped spinning for a second. I asked her if I was really going to be a dad, and she smiled and confirmed that I was. Sophia asked if I was ready to be a father, and I felt a surge of pure joy. I pulled her into a tight hug and kissed the top of her head, telling her how happy I was. I told her it was the best news I'd ever heard. That weekend, Sophia decided to visit her parents to share the news of the pregnancy with them in person. I offered to go with her because I was worried, but she insisted I stay and finish my work. She told me she didn't want to be a distraction and promised she would be perfectly fine on her own. I went into the office and got so caught up in my work that I lost track of time. By the time I was ready to head home, it was already 10 at night. I was just about to shut down my computer when I heard someone walking around in the hallway. I wondered who else could possibly be in the building so late. I looked up to see Ava standing in my doorway with a takeout container, telling me she figured I hadn't eaten and had brought me noodles from our favorite spot back in college. She set the food down in front of me, reminding me how much I used to love it. I told her I didn't want it and that Sophia was waiting for me at home. Then I grabbed my coat to leave. She told me not to lie because she had seen Sophia leave earlier that afternoon. I was disgusted and asked her if she was actually stalking my fiancé. She just sneered and asked if I had something to hide. Then her tone shifted to a desperate plea, begging me to just have one bite of the food she brought. I was completely fed up, so I pulled some cash out of my wallet and shoved it in her hand. I told her I was paying for the meal and demanded that she leave immediately. She grabbed my wrist, her nails digging into my skin as she asked why I kept pushing her away. She demanded to know what was so special about Sophia. She reminded me of our 7 years together and asked how I could just walk away from that. She begged me to leave Sophia and come back to her, claiming she didn't care about my past as long as we were together. I told her she was being delusional and needed help. I warned her to stay away from me and Sophia, telling her that if she didn't stop harassing us, I would have no choice but to call the police. She froze and slowly let go of my arm. She stared at me with a hollow expression and told me I was incredibly heartless. I told her I wasn't even close to being as heartless as she had been to me. She just kept repeating the word good, while her eyes filled with tears and her lips began to shake. She mentioned that she knew I had bought her company after she left. She asked if she could visit her old office one last time before she moved on. She promised that if I granted her this one wish, she would never bother me again. I really didn't want to do it, especially since I was the one who had done all the work to make that company successful. I had been the one securing the funding and managing the IPO while she was distracted. Eventually, I had just merged it into my own firm, and I didn't really want her to see how much I had changed it. I realized that saying no might just make her more obsessed, so I decided to get it over with. I agreed to meet her at the office the following Friday. The week flew by, and I found myself waiting for her outside the building on Friday morning. She showed up wearing an old suit that I had helped her pick out 7 years ago. She looked professional enough, but the fabric was worn and the style was clearly from another era. It looked cheap compared to the modern clothes people wear now. She asked me what I thought, mentioning that she had kept the suit all these years because I was the one who chose it. I didn't even acknowledge the comment and just told her to head inside. I gave her a tour of the different departments and briefly mentioned some of the major contracts we had signed since the merger. When we got to my office, she ran her hand over the leather executive chair and let out a long sigh. She remarked on how much everything had changed, and I simply told her that the company was much more successful and stable now. She thanked me for taking care of the company, calling it her creation and saying it was filled with our shared memories. Her words rubbed me the wrong way, so I corrected her immediately. I told her the company belonged to me now and that I wasn't just some caretaker for her legacy. I reminded her that the company didn't even have the same name anymore. She just smiled and agreed with me. She claimed that my decision to buy her company proved that I still had feelings for her. I told her she was delusional and that it had been a purely business decision. I was walking Ava out when we ran into Sophia at the entrance. Sophia greeted Ava politely before turning to me and saying it was time for us to go. I was confused and asked where we were going. Sophia explained that Ava had told her I wanted to take them both out to lunch and had asked her to meet us there. As Sophia spoke, I shot a furious look at Ava. She just gave me a triumphant smirk and walked over to link arms with Sophia. She told Sophia not to be mad at me, claiming I was probably just too busy to mention the lunch plans. She said she had already made a reservation and urged us to get going. Once we were at the restaurant, Ava kept piling food onto Sophia's plate. Sophia politely thanked her and told her she should focus on her own meal. Ava told her she needed to eat more because she looked far too thin, joking that people might think I wasn't taking care of her. She then reached over and put some food on my plate as well. She told me it was my favorite dish and then smiled, saying that the lunch was on her. She told Sophia she wasn't going to let her leave until she was full. Sophia clearly picked up on the weird vibe, but just nodded and stayed quiet. I finally lost my patience and slammed my fork down, asking Ava if she was done playing games. She acted shocked and told me I was being too aggressive and scaring Sophia. She scolded me like I was a child before turning to Sophia and telling her to ignore my outbursts. She claimed I had always been impulsive and hot-headed. Sophia went quiet for a moment before asking Ava directly if she was the one who had actually set up this lunch. Ava tried to play it off, saying again that she and I were hosting Sophia together. I cut her off and told her to get out of the restaurant immediately. I honestly couldn't believe she had the nerve to be this shameless. I didn't want her in my presence for a single second longer. I raised my hand and pointed directly toward the exit. Sophia gently tugged on my sleeve, silently telling me to keep my cool, before she turned her attention toward Ava. She asked Ava if there was something specific she wanted to say since she was the one who had arranged this entire meeting. Ava paused as if she were deep in thought, waiting a few seconds before speaking up. She asked Sophia if she remembered the story she had shared about her ex-husband. Sophia nodded, though she clearly looked uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Ava then announced that she wanted to get back together with him and asked for Sophia's opinion. Sophia looked down and quietly replied that a reconciliation would usually require both people to be on the same page. Ava nodded with a satisfied smirk and told Sophia there was one detail she had conveniently left out. She revealed that her ex-husband was actually James. To Ava's surprise, Sophia remained perfectly calm and said she was already well aware of that fact. Ava froze in shock, her eyes widening as she processed the response. She demanded to know if Sophia had known the whole time. After a moment of stunned silence, Ava suddenly broke into a fit of hysterical laughter. Before either of us could react, Ava lunged across the table and grabbed Sophia by the throat. She screamed at her, calling her a bitch and demanding to know why she wouldn't let go of the man who used to belong to her. She accused Sophia of being nothing more than a homewrecker who had brainwashed me. She yelled that I was so obsessed with Sophia that I wouldn't even look at her anymore. Ava was convinced that if Sophia were out of the picture, I would have come crawling back to her months ago. I shouted at Ava, asking if she had completely lost her mind as I rushed over to pry her hands off Sophia. I pulled Sophia behind me to protect her while she gasped for air and clutched her throat. Her eyes immediately filled with tears from the shock of the assault. Sophia found her voice and told Ava that whatever history they had was over because the divorce was final. She explained that James and she were building a life together now. She made it clear that there was no longer any future for Ava and me. Sophia firmly stated that I belonged with her and that we were happy and in love. She told Ava to stop interfering in our private lives once and for all. Ava screamed back that she wasn't the one clinging on, insisting that I was still the one in love with her. She accused Sophia of being the one who tore our marriage apart. She yelled that Sophia was the villain who destroyed our home and was now acting like she had the moral high ground. Ava was completely unhinged at this point, her bloodshot eyes fixed on me with terrifying intensity. She begged me to admit that I still loved her and suggested we leave Sophia behind to start over. I looked down at her with nothing but contempt and told her to stop being so delusional. I told her flat out that she made me feel physically ill. She started rambling, questioning why I had ever pursued her or married her if I didn't love her. She reminded me that we had a 7-year history together. She couldn't wrap her head around the fact that my feelings for her were completely dead. She cried about how much she needed me and asked how I could be so heartless. I let out a cold laugh and asked if she had truly forgotten why I left in the first place. I reminded her about her infidelity and how she had chosen another man over our marriage. She tried to argue that I had it all wrong and claimed she had never stopped loving me. She insisted that I was the only one she ever truly cared about. She used her return as proof, asking why else she would have left Ethan to come back to me. I laughed in her face and told her that Cameron had already filled me in on the real story. I knew she hadn't left Ethan out of love for me. The truth was that he had found someone else in London and kicked her out, leaving her with nowhere else to go. She admitted that things with Ethan had ended badly, but she insisted her feelings for me were genuine. She refused to believe that 7 years of history could just vanish into thin air. She looked at me desperately, begging for me to admit that I still cared. She claimed that I must still have a place for her in my heart and try to grab my hand. I yanked it away and told her to get out of my sight. I told her that as far as I was concerned, the woman I once loved had died 7 years ago. She sobbed that it couldn't be true and begged me not to treat her this way. She kept repeating that she was my Ava, the woman I used to adore. Her eyes were a mess of tears and conflicting emotions as she struggled to accept that she had lost me forever. The whole chaotic scene finally came to an end when the police arrived. I was relieved that I had the presence of mind to call 911 the moment she put her hands on Sophia. Given how unstable she was, there was no telling how much worse things could have gotten if the cops hadn't shown up. As we were driving home, I asked Sophia why she had agreed to the lunch when she knew exactly who Ava was and what she was capable of. Sophia admitted she knew the lunch would be a disaster, but she explained that Ava had manipulated her. Ava had called her and claimed that if Sophia didn't show up, I would be forced to have a private dinner with her instead. Sophia looked down, clearly upset by the whole ordeal. My frustration evaporated the moment I realized she was just trying to protect our relationship. I reached over and gently stroked her hair, assuring her that I would never have agreed to a solo dinner with Ava under any circumstances. She confessed that she was still terrified of losing me. She told me that when Ava started talking about getting back together, she panicked. She was scared that I might still have lingering feelings for my ex, and that she wouldn't be enough to make me stay. She admitted that she loved me too much to just walk away without a fight. Tears started streaming down her face as she spoke, and I reached over to gently wipe them away. I told her I was surprised because she had seemed so composed and in control during the actual lunch. I asked her what she would have done if I had actually chosen to go back to Ava. I wondered if she would have just walked away and what that would have meant for her and our baby. She whispered that she didn't have an answer, only that she wanted to be with me, but didn't want to stand in the way of my happiness. I called her a little fool and pulled her into a tight embrace. I told her that from now on, we would face everything as a team, and that she never had to carry a burden alone again. I reminded her of her own words about marriage being built on honesty and the little things in life. I pointed out that we could never have a real future if we kept secrets from one another. Sophia sniffled and gave me a small, genuine smile, admitting that I was right. Shortly after we got home, I received a notification from the NYPD stating that Ava had been officially processed and detained. Apparently, she hadn't calmed down at the precinct and had spent the entire time screaming insults at the officers. Before they would release her, the authorities mandated a psychiatric evaluation. The results came back showing that she was struggling with clinical depression and severe anxiety. I never saw or heard from Ava again after that day. Cameron eventually told me that she had made several desperate attempts to get back with Ethan, but it turned out he had never been serious about her to begin with. Ethan was living a high life in London and had absolutely no interest in taking her back. With no other options, Ava ended up drifting around San Francisco for a while, trying to pick up the pieces of her life. She stopped showing up to any of our alumni events after that. As time went on, her name stopped coming up in conversations altogether. Eventually, she became nothing more than a ghost from my past. The memory of her faded away until she was just a distant, blurry figure in a story I no longer care to tell. There is no shame in having been blind to someone's true nature. The real tragedy is staying once you see the truth. Walking away from someone who drains your soul isn't being cold. It is an act of survival. There is no reason to look back or hold on to bitterness. Once you find true happiness and clarity, your past heartbreaks become badges of honor. The people who tried to break you simply don't deserve a single second of your future. I hope you always have the courage to love with your whole heart and the strength to walk away when you need to.